I had never felt so invisible in my life. The words she said at dinner still echoed in my head. "Your voice is annoying. Go eat in your room." My daughter-in-law, Rebecca, was always a little cold, but tonight it felt different. As I stared down at my untouched plate, I felt the weight of her words settle in. My hands trembled slightly as I stood up, quietly excusing myself from the table. No one said a word, not even my son, John, who usually had a kind word or at least some reassurance. But tonight, he remained silent. He didn't defend me, didn't even look at me. I walked away from the table, my heart sinking deeper with every step. I had been silenced, humiliated, and ignored all at once, and yet I obeyed. I went to my room. I closed the door behind me, sat on the edge of my bed, and allowed the tears to fall. I couldn't understand how everything had changed so suddenly. I had always been the one to keep things together in this family, the one who made sure everyone was happy, fed, and cared for. But now, it felt like I didn't even matter anymore. It had been a long time coming, this feeling of being pushed aside. Ever since Rebecca entered our lives, things had slowly started to shift. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. Maybe she was just distant. Maybe it was just my age. Maybe she didn't mean to be hurtful. But tonight, it was undeniable. She wanted me gone, and John, my own son, allowed it. I thought back to the days when Arthur, my late husband, and I had built this home together. We had raised John in this house, filled it with love, laughter, and memories. But those days felt like they belonged to someone else now. I couldn't help but wonder what went wrong. When did I become so insignificant? I had always taken pride in being there for my family. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, I was the one who made sure it was special. And yet, here I was, banished to my room like some unwanted guest. The thought made me choke on my tears. I didn't deserve this. I had spent my life giving everything to them, and this is how they repaid me? I was ready to let go of my sadness, to face the reality that this was what my life had become. But in that moment, as I sat alone, a part of me decided I wouldn't just let this happen. I wouldn't let them think they could walk all over me forever. Maybe I had been too silent for too long. Maybe I had let them think I didn't care about myself. But I would change that. I would stand up for myself. And the next time Rebecca spoke to me like that, I wouldn't back down. The days that followed were quiet. The house felt colder, emptier, as if it was holding its breath. I spent my time in my room, reflecting on everything that had led me here. I had been part of this family for so long, but now it seemed like I was nothing more than an afterthought. I had given so much of myself, always putting others first, but now I was alone. I began to realize how much I had ignored over the years. The little ways Rebecca had always made me feel like I was in the way John never really stood up for me. It wasn't just the dinner. It wasn't just the words she had said. It was everything. It was the silent treatment, the cold stares, the way she took over every family event, every conversation. I had spent years being a good mother, a good wife, a good mother-in-law, but somehow I had become invisible. And in that silence, a realization settled in. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I couldn't keep letting them push me aside. I wasn't weak, and I wouldn't let them treat me like I was. So, I decided to take action. I began with small steps, the ones that seemed almost insignificant but felt like victories. I started by not letting Rebecca's comments get to me as much. Every time she spoke to me with that cold, dismissive tone, I bit my tongue and stayed calm. But inside, I was planning. I wasn't going to be silenced anymore. I began to make my own decisions, doing things for myself instead of always waiting for approval from John or Rebecca. I started to take walks every morning, enjoying the fresh air, something I hadn't done in years. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed it, how much I needed it. I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I was reclaiming parts of my life that I had lost. But there was still something that gnawed at me. I couldn't understand why John wasn't seeing what was happening. Why wasn't he standing up for me? I thought back to when he was a child, the way he'd look at me with such love and admiration. He'd always been the sweet boy who cared about his family. What had happened to him? It wasn't like he didn't know how Rebecca treated me. He had to see it. I began to notice little things, the way he avoided my gaze, the way he let Rebecca make decisions for him. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit. I tried to talk to him, tried to bring up how I was feeling, but he always changed the subject or made excuses. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about Rebecca. This was about John, too. He had chosen her over me, over the woman who had raised him, loved him, and sacrificed so much for him. He wasn't the same person anymore, and that broke my heart. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I wasn't going to let the silence take over my life any longer. It was time for me to take control of my own destiny. I couldn't wait for them to change. I had to change first. And that's when I decided to do something I never thought I'd have to do. I decided to have a conversation with Rebecca. It wasn't going to be easy. I had no idea how she would react. But I knew I couldn't let her continue treating me this way, not without saying something. I had to make my voice heard, no matter the consequences. The next few days were filled with a quiet tension. Rebecca's words still echoed in my mind, but I didn't let it consume me. Instead, I focused on the small victories I had claimed in the silence. I spent more time alone in my room, reading, reflecting, and making plans. I was no longer the same woman I had been. The tears I shed in the privacy of my room were not for sympathy. They were tears of realization. I had been living in the shadow of my family's indifference for too long, and I wouldn't stand for it anymore. But there was still something unresolved. I could feel it in the air every time Rebecca walked through the house. Her presence was like a storm waiting to break, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming. I knew I had to act, but I also knew it would not be easy. My son, John, remained distant, his silence louder than any words Rebecca could say. I couldn't help but wonder if he even cared anymore. I spent countless nights wondering if he would ever see the truth. I had given him everything, raised him with love, and now he couldn't even see the woman who had been there for him through it all. I could no longer rely on him to change the situation. The time had come for me to take charge of my life, no matter the consequences. It wasn't just about standing up to Rebecca anymore. It was about standing up for myself, for the person I had become. I didn't need anyone's approval or validation. The day finally came when I knew it was time to face Rebecca. I had to confront her, make it clear that I would not tolerate being treated as less than. I had prepared myself for this moment, but I couldn't deny the nervousness that crept up on me. I had been quiet for so long, and now I was about to break the silence. I found her in the kitchen, making tea, as she often did after dinner. She didn't even look up when I entered the room. The moment felt heavy, like the calm before the storm. I took a deep breath and spoke, my voice steady but firm. "Rebecca, we need to talk." She froze for a moment, but then continued with her task, as if dismissing me without a word. I wasn't going to let her silence me anymore. "I'm not going to stand by and let you treat me this way," I said, my voice rising just slightly. She turned to face me, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I replied. "The way you spoke to me at dinner, the way you've been treating me for months. I'm your mother-in-law, and I deserve respect." Her expression softened for a moment, but I could tell it was only a mask. "Oh, please, don't make this into something it's not," she said with a smirk. "You're just overreacting." "No, I'm not," I shot back. "I've been patient, I've kept quiet, but that ends now. I won't let you speak to me like that anymore. I've spent my whole life supporting this family, and I'm not going to let you tear me down anymore." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Rebecca's gaze hardened, and for a moment, I saw something cold in her eyes. But I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, no longer afraid of what she would say next. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke, her voice low. "Fine, you want respect? You'll get it. But don't expect things to go back to how they were. I have no intention of changing for you." And just like that, the conversation ended. She turned back to her tea, as if nothing had happened. But I knew something had shifted. I had spoken up. I had taken control of my own life, and that was more than I could have hoped for. I walked out of the kitchen with my head held high, no longer carrying the weight of silence on my shoulders. The days after the confrontation felt like a strange, quiet calm. Rebecca didn't change, but neither did I. I could feel the shift in the air. There was a tension now, but it wasn't the same. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. I had spoken up, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control over my own life. John, however, was still distant. His silence spoke louder than any words he could say, and I couldn't help but feel like he was avoiding me on purpose. It hurt, but I had made my peace with it. I couldn't change him, and I wasn't going to waste my energy trying. I spent my time doing things for myself. I began to go out more, walking around the neighborhood, breathing in the fresh air. I hadn't realized how much I had neglected myself until now. The simple act of going for a walk, the feeling of the sun on my face, it was like rediscovering a part of me. I had forgotten. I realized that I had spent so many years taking care of everyone else. I had forgotten to take care of myself. I was determined to change that. I also started reconnecting with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years. They were surprised to hear from me, but we quickly fell into easy conversation, as if no time had passed. It felt good to be reminded that I was more than just a mother, a wife, or a mother-in-law. I was Martha Smith, a woman with her own needs and desires. But even as I took these small steps to regain my independence, something still felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the situation than I had realized. Rebecca's actions, her coldness, they weren't just random acts of cruelty. There was a deeper motive at play, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I couldn't help but wonder if Rebecca had been planning this for a while. It seemed so deliberate, so calculated. She didn't just want to push me aside, she wanted something. And I wasn't going to sit by and let her take it without a fight. I started paying closer attention to everything. The way she looked at me, the way she spoke to John, the way she always made decisions without consulting me. It was all starting to make sense. She didn't just want me out of the house. She wanted control. But what for? What was she after? One evening, as I sat in my room, I overheard a conversation between Rebecca and John. At first, I couldn't make out the words, but as I listened, it became clear. They were talking about the house, about selling it. My heart skipped a beat. This house, the one that Arthur and I had built together, the place that held all of our memories, was at the center of their conversation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were planning to sell the house, to move me out, and all of it was being done without my knowledge. I couldn't let this happen. I had to do something, but what? I wasn't going to let Rebecca have everything she wanted, not without a fight. The next day, I decided to talk to John. I had to make him see what was going on, to make him realize how much I was being pushed aside. When he came over later that afternoon, I asked him if he had been a part of Rebecca's plans to sell the house. He looked at me, his eyes avoiding mine, and I knew right then that he had been. He didn't deny it, and that hurt more than anything. I thought you'd want to move somewhere smaller, he said, his voice distant. It's too much for you to handle on your own. This house is mine, I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. It was built by your father and me, and I won't let you take it away from me. Not without a fight. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. I'm just trying to do what's best for you, Mom. Rebecca, and I thought it would be easier. I didn't let him finish. Easier for you, you mean? I snapped. This isn't about what's best for me. This is about what's easiest for you. You want to sell the house, get rid of me, and move on with your life. Well, that's not going to happen. Not on my watch. His face fell, but I didn't feel sorry for him. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. I don't need you to protect me, John, I continued. I can take care of myself, but I won't be silenced anymore. I won't be pushed aside like some forgotten piece of furniture. I have a life, and I'm going to live it. The room was quiet for a moment, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd said everything I needed to say. John didn't say anything more, and I didn't expect him to. But I knew that things were different now. I had finally stood up for myself, and that was something I could be proud of. The days after our conversation were strange, filled with an uncomfortable silence that hung heavy in the house. John didn't say much after our confrontation, and I could see he was struggling with what I had said. Rebecca, on the other hand, continued as if nothing had happened, but I could feel her tension every time our paths crossed. It wasn't the same anymore. There was a quiet understanding that we were no longer playing by the same rules. I didn't expect John to suddenly change overnight. It wasn't that simple, but there was a shift in me, something that had been awakened, and I wasn't willing to go back to the way things were. I started spending more time outside, walking through the park in the afternoons. The air felt different now, fresh with the promise of change. I didn't realize how much I had been holding in until I allowed myself to breathe freely again. I began to make plans, small ones at first. A trip to visit an old friend in another state, a weekend away by the beach, things I had always put off because of family obligations. But now it was different. I wasn't going to let anyone stop me from living my life. I knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance. There always was. But I was ready to face it. One evening, as I sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt something shift inside me. I realized that I had been giving up pieces of myself for so long that I didn't know who I was anymore. But now I was starting to remember. I was Martha Smith, and I wasn't going to be anyone's doormat anymore. The next day, I called my friend, Mary, and we made plans to meet for lunch the following week. It felt good to reconnect with someone who knew me before all this, someone who remembered me as the woman I used to be, not just as someone's mother or mother-in-law. We talked for hours, reminiscing about the past, laughing, and talking about the future. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I felt like myself again. When I got back home, I noticed Rebecca sitting in the living room, reading a book. She glanced up as I walked by, her expression unreadable. It was a small thing, but it hit me. She had been waiting for me to break, to fall back into my old habits of being passive and silent. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. I walked past her without saying a word, my back straight and my head held high. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. As the days passed, I continued to focus on myself. I joined a local book club, signed up for yoga classes, and spent more time with friends who made me feel valued. Slowly, I began to see the changes in my life. I was no longer defined by my relationships with others. I was no longer just a mother or a grandmother. I was a woman, and I had a right to live my life the way I wanted to. One afternoon, I decided to take a drive. I hadn't been out of the house for a while, and I needed to clear my head. I drove for miles, the wind in my hair, the open road ahead of me. It was freeing, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. As I drove through the countryside, I thought about everything that had happened, about my family, about John, and about Rebecca. It was clear now that they had their own plans for my life, but I wasn't going to let them dictate my future. I had made my choice, and it was time to start living it. When I returned home that evening, I walked into the house with a sense of purpose. I was no longer afraid. I was no longer waiting for someone else to make decisions for me. I had taken control of my own life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. John was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. He looked up, but there was no apology in his eyes, no acknowledgement of what had passed between us. I wasn't surprised. I had come to terms with the fact that he might never see things my way. But that didn't matter anymore. "I'm leaving for a few days," I said calmly. "I'm going to visit Mary." John didn't respond, but I didn't need him to. I was doing this for me. It felt good to make my own choices, to live life on my terms. And I knew that, no matter what, I would never go back to the way things were. I was finally free. The days passed slowly, and as I settled into this new version of my life, something unexpected happened. John called. It was late in the afternoon when I saw his name flash on my phone screen. I hesitated for a moment before picking it up, not sure what to expect. "Mom, can we talk?" His voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. I didn't know what to say. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure if I was ready to face him again. But there was a part of me that still cared for the boy I raised. "What's it about?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "I think we need to clear the air," he said. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day." I could hear the unease in his voice. It wasn't like him to sound this vulnerable. I wasn't sure if he was genuinely sorry or just trying to ease his guilt, but I decided to listen. "All right," I said. "I'll be home in an hour." The drive back was longer than usual. I had been so used to avoiding these types of conversations that the thought of sitting down with John felt like stepping into a world I wasn't sure I wanted to return to. But I had made it this far, and I wasn't going to back down now. When I arrived home, John was already sitting at the kitchen table, his eyes fixed on the floor. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavy, like a dam waiting to break. Finally, I broke the stillness. "What is it, John? What do you want to say?" He looked up, meeting my gaze for the first time in days. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About Rebecca, about you, about how I've treated you." His words were slow, as if he was choosing them carefully. "I've realized that I've been so caught up in my own life, my own problems, that I didn't see what was happening with you. I didn't realize how much I was neglecting you, and I'm sorry for that." His apology hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time feeling invisible, discarded, that hearing him finally acknowledge my pain made something shift in me. I wanted to respond, to tell him that it was okay, but it wasn't. "It wasn't okay. I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "But it's not enough. You let me down, John. I needed you, and you weren't there." I could see the guilt in his eyes, but there was something else too, regret. "I know," he whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to make things right. I want to try to fix what's been broken." For a moment, I was quiet. His words, though heartfelt, didn't erase the years of hurt. They didn't undo the damage that had been done. But they were a start, a small start. "I don't know if you can fix everything," I said softly, "but I'm willing to see where this goes. I can't keep living in the past, John. I need to move forward." He nodded, his shoulders slumping in relief. "Thank you, Mom. I know I've messed up, but I'll do better. I promise." There was a long pause before I spoke again. "I want you to understand something, though," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not just doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. I'm not going to let anyone walk all over me again, not even you. I've spent too many years putting others first, and now I need to focus on myself." The words hung in the air, both a warning and a promise. John nodded again, his expression more serious than I had ever seen it. "I understand, Mom. I'll respect that." And for the first time in a long while, I believed him. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Not just for me and John, but for me. For the first time, I felt like I had reclaimed my life. I wasn't just a mother, a grandmother, a wife. I was Martha Smith, a woman who had learned to stand up for herself, to claim her voice, and to demand respect. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a start. And that was enough for now. It had been weeks since John and I had that conversation, and although things had started to shift, the tension in the house was still thick. I had begun to reclaim my life, but Rebecca's presence still loomed over every interaction, as if she were waiting for me to slip, to fall back into the quiet, invisible role I had once played. But I wasn't going to let that happen. One morning, as I sat at the kitchen table, drinking my coffee, I heard the familiar sound of Rebecca's voice from the hallway. She was speaking to John, her tone sharp as usual, but today I noticed something different. There was an edge to her voice, a slight crack that I hadn't heard before. I stood still for a moment, straining to catch the words, but the conversation stopped suddenly, and I was left with an eerie silence. I couldn't help but wonder what had been said. Was she finally realizing that I wasn't the same woman I had been before? That I had a voice, and I was using it? But instead of confronting her directly, I decided to wait. The time for confrontation wasn't now. I had learned that sometimes silence could be more powerful than words. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my head, to take a moment for myself. As I walked through the neighborhood, I noticed the world around me seemed brighter, more alive. The trees were in full bloom, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The air felt fresh and crisp, the kind of day that reminded me that life could still be beautiful, even after everything I'd been through. I smiled to myself, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for far too long. As I turned the corner, I bumped into an old neighbor, someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Joan, and she was one of those people who made you feel like the world was still full of good things. We chatted for a while, catching up on life, and I was struck by how much I had missed these simple moments of connection. Joan asked me how I was doing, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't hold back. I told her everything about John, about Rebecca, about how I had been struggling to find my place again. She listened without judgment, offering kind words and a reassuring smile. After our conversation, I felt lighter. It was as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders just by talking to someone who understood. When I returned home, things were different. Rebecca was still in the house, but I no longer felt the same anxiety when she was around. I had found my strength again, and nothing she could say or do could take that away from me. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, I reflected on how far I had come. It wasn't just about standing up to Rebecca or John. It was about reclaiming myself, my life, and my peace of mind. I wasn't going to let anyone define me or control my happiness. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer afraid of what the future might hold. I had learned that no matter what life threw my way, I had the power to rise above it, to stand strong and move forward. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. It had been a few more weeks since I had spoken to John, and things had settled into a strange routine. There was still tension in the air, but it wasn't as suffocating as it had been before. I had learned to live my life for myself, and that gave me a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. Rebecca, however, remained a constant presence in the house, and I could tell she was still trying to regain control of things. But I wasn't the same woman who would quietly accept it anymore. One evening, as I was cleaning the kitchen after dinner, I noticed Rebecca standing in the doorway, watching me. I could feel her eyes on me, and though she said nothing, there was something in her gaze that made me uneasy. She didn't move, didn't offer to help, just stood there, silently judging. I decided not to acknowledge her, focusing instead on wiping down the countertops. It was my way of showing her that I wasn't afraid of her anymore, that I wasn't going to let her intimidate me. You know, she said, her voice breaking the silence, you really should think about moving out. I've been talking to John, and we think it would be better for everyone if you found a place of your own. I didn't turn to face her, but I could feel the anger rising in my chest. I had been expecting this. She had been trying to push me out of the house for months, and now she was just being bold enough to say it to my face. But I wasn't going to let her win. I've been thinking about it, I replied calmly, and I've decided that I'm not going anywhere. I finally turned to face her, meeting her eyes with a strength I hadn't known I had. This is my home, Rebecca. This house belongs to me just as much as it belongs to John. I'm not going to let you push me out. Her expression faltered for a moment, the smugness disappearing as she realized I wasn't backing down. But then she quickly masked it, replacing it with a fake smile. If you say so, she said, turning to leave the room. But before she left, she added, just don't expect us to change everything for you. The door shut behind her with a soft click, and I was left standing there, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. I knew what I had said was the right thing, but a part of me still felt the sting of her words. She didn't want me here, and it was clear she was doing everything she could to make me feel unwelcome. But I wasn't going to let that break me. I had spent too long being passive, too long letting others control my life. It was time to take control back. Over the next few days, I noticed a shift. Rebecca's attitude towards me seemed to change, but not in the way I had expected. Instead of her usual coldness, she started acting as if nothing had happened, as if she had never tried to get me to leave. It was as if she was testing me, seeing if I would give in to her manipulations. But I wasn't going to play that game anymore. I kept my distance, sticking to my own routine, spending more time out of the house, and doing things that made me happy. The more I focused on myself, the less I cared about what she thought. Slowly, I started to notice changes in John too. He seemed more open, more willing to talk to me. The coldness that had been between us for so long began to thaw, and I could see that he was trying, in his own way, to make amends for the distance he had put between us. One evening, after dinner, John came to me and asked if we could talk. This time, there was no hesitation in my heart. I agreed, and we sat down together at the kitchen table. I've been thinking about what? You said, he began. About how I've treated you, how I've let things go on for so long. I want to make it right. I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm willing to try. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I believed him. I appreciate that, John, I said softly. But it's going to take more than just words. It's going to take action. I can't be the only one who tries to fix this. You have to be willing to make the effort too. He nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. "I know," he said quietly, "and I will." I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, I felt a sense of hope. I wasn't sure if things could go back to the way they were before, but I knew that I had the strength to keep moving forward, no matter what. I had learned that my voice mattered, that I had a right to be heard, and that I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life, and nothing was going to take that from me. The weeks continued to pass, and life started to find its rhythm again. John and I had begun to rebuild our relationship, step by step. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't easy, but there was progress, and that was enough for now. Rebecca, however, remained a thorn in the side of our fragile peace. She had started to act as though everything was fine, as though her past behavior had never happened. But I wasn't fooled. I could see through her attempts to act like nothing had changed. She hadn't changed, but I had. I was no longer the woman who would sit quietly in the background, accepting whatever came my way. I was Martha Smith, and I had found my strength. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room reading a book, I heard the sound of the door opening. It was John. He walked in, his expression unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it, something unspoken hanging in the air between us. I closed the book, setting it down on the table, and nodded. "Of course," I replied, motioning for him to sit down. We sat there in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then, finally he spoke. "I know things haven't been easy between us. I know I've made mistakes, and I want to make it right. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to try. I want to be a better son, a better husband, and a better person." His words were simple, but they carried a weight of sincerity. For a moment, I found myself speechless. I hadn't expected this. I had thought that maybe he would never truly understand, that maybe he would always side with Rebecca, but here he was offering an apology. "John, I appreciate that," I said softly, "but you need to understand something. This isn't just about what happened with Rebecca. It's about the way I've been treated, how I've been pushed aside, ignored. I've spent years taking care of everyone else, and I've forgotten about myself. I can't let that happen anymore." He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I get that now. I didn't realize how much I had hurt you, how much I had taken you for granted. I'm sorry for that, truly, and I want to do better." I looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide if I could believe him. I wanted to, but I also knew that words were easy and actions were what mattered most. "It's going to take time," I said, "but I'm willing to try, John. I just need to see that you're really ready to make the effort, not just for me, but for yourself, for your own peace." He reached out, placing his hand gently on mine. "I am. I swear it." The sincerity in his voice was enough to convince me, at least for now. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the path to healing. It wasn't going to be perfect, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but it was a start. Later that evening, as I was sitting by the window, I reflected on everything that had happened. I had come so far from the woman I had been, the quiet, invisible mother who let everyone walk all over her. I had found my voice, and in doing so, I had regained my life. Rebecca still lingered in the background, her presence as cold as ever, but I was no longer afraid of her. I had taken control of my own destiny, and no one could take that away from me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and for the first time in years, I felt free. It was the beginning of something new, something I hadn't even realized I needed until now. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly at peace with who I was and where my life was heading. In this emotional family story, the bond between a mother and her son is tested as they navigate years of unspoken tension and emotional neglect. The mother's voice is silenced by a dismissive daughter-in-law, but as the story unfolds, she takes a stand and begins to reclaim her life. The family dynamics shift as the mother confronts her son, confronting the reality that he has allowed her to be pushed aside for too long. As the mother and son slowly reconnect, they must both learn to face their past mistakes, while a constant struggle with the daughter-in-law threatens to disrupt their fragile peace. The emotional journey is filled with moments of realization, as the mother, once quiet and invisible, grows stronger and begins to live for herself again, despite the toxic presence of her daughter-in-law. This family story shows the painful reality of being neglected by the ones you love, but it also highlights the power of reclaiming your voice and independence. Through these emotionally charged family stories, we witness the transformation of the mother as she stands up for herself, refuses to accept the past, and creates a new future for herself. The story continues to unfold as we see how these family stories will evolve and whether they can overcome the challenges posed by emotional betrayal, manipulation, and silence. These family stories, driven by powerful emotions, are a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the importance of standing up for oneself in the face of adversity. Create a realistic, middle-aged white woman around 70 years old. She is wearing a comfortable but simple outfit, such as a sweater and pants. The scene is captured from a direct front view. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Create a realistic, middle-aged white man around 45 years old. He is wearing a casual shirt and jeans. His facial expression is neutral but somewhat distant. The scene is captured from a direct front view. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. 1. A tense, emotionally charged scene. Both characters, the mother and the son, stand in the living room facing each other. The air is thick with unspoken words, eyes locked. The mother, holding back tears, delivers a cutting remark to the son. His face is filled with regret, but also defensiveness. Their heated confrontation is palpable, each word exchanged like a slap. The room feels smaller as they both struggle to bridge the emotional chasm that has grown between them over the years. The scene feels like a turning point, the weight of years of silent pain finally being released. The tension is so thick you can almost cut it with a knife. 2. The first character, the mother, is in the kitchen early in the morning. The sunlight pours through the window as she carefully prepares breakfast. She hums a quiet tune, the rhythm of daily life. The camera captures her wrinkles and the strength in her hands as she moves with purpose. The room is quiet except for the soft sounds of the home coming alive. There is a sense of solitude in the scene, a woman who has given everything to her family, but now she is learning to live for herself. Her face shows a quiet, determined resolve beneath the surface of normalcy. 3. The second character, the son, is sitting in his office, dressed in a sharp suit, surrounded by paperwork. His face is tense, eyes scanning documents, but his mind clearly drifts to something else. He rubs his forehead, frustrated with the chaos of his work. There's a sense of emotional detachment in the air as he gazes out of the window, lost in thought. Despite the outward success, there is a clear sense of emptiness. The scene emphasizes his internal conflict, torn between his obligations and the guilt he feels for neglecting his mother. The office setting feels cold and sterile, just like his emotional distance. For a family dinner table, the three characters sit together, but the atmosphere is far from warm. The mother and son sit on opposite sides, a subtle divide between them. The daughter-in-law is present, a smile plastered on her face, but there's a clear tension in her eyes as she watches the dynamic unfold. The son tries to make small talk, but his focus is on the mother, who remains quiet and distant. The mother, however, notices the subtle manipulations of the daughter-in-law. Her silent observation speaks volumes, and a storm is brewing beneath her calm exterior. The scene builds slowly, like the calm before a storm, but the tension is undeniable. 5. The camera zooms in on the mother walking through a park, looking up at the sky. The leaves rustle around her as she takes slow, deep breaths. She's alone, yet there's a sense of freedom in her solitude. She smiles softly to herself, finally allowing herself moments of peace. The background is peaceful, the world moving on as she finds herself again. The camera captures her face, soft and content, showing how far she's come. There's a feeling of quiet triumph in this moment, as the mother begins to carve out her own space in a world that had once defined her by others. 6. The final scene takes place in the living room. The son and mother sit together, no longer strangers, but not fully healed either. There's an unspoken understanding between them. The tension of the past is still there, but it's tempered by the quiet promise of change. The mother looks at the son, her gaze filled with a mixture of hope and resolve. They don't need to say much. The moment speaks for itself. The camera lingers on their faces, capturing the emotional weight of years of unresolved feelings, but also a shared sense of peace, a new chapter beginning.